I hope that I get to meet some of you there next Saturday. But let's go ahead and get into this video. I'm going to be showing you how to draw a kind of chibi celebration of autumn, possibly my favorite season of the year. And what we're going to do is be drawing two characters, chibi characters, having a peaceful little stroll through the autumn leaves. People like to know what size I'm working at. This square that I've drawn is 4.5 inches on all sides. That works out to around 11.5 centimeters. Then I've just put a little intersecting line there right in the middle. Well, I'm going to do just a few basic guidelines to get us started. Let's begin by drawing, well, I'll draw the head of the female character over here. All right, so you see it's very rounded at the top, coming down to a little bit of a point here at the chin. It's going to be a 3/4 point of view. She's going to be turning in this direction. And, you know, later on I'm going to be drawing the facial features and so forth. But let's carry on with drawing some guidelines for the body. Okay, so you can already see the pose of her sort of walking with the one leg passing in front of the other. And I suppose I should add just a little indication back here of that other leg, and otherwise I would just say pay attention to the relationship between the body and the head, shifted maybe a little over to one side rather than having the body directly underneath. And really all I have to do now is just add the arms, so let's go ahead and get those into place. All right, so you can see here that I've got the sort of what looks like a very large hand here. This is actually going to be the two hands. They're holding hands. But notice the location right in the middle where that line is, that central line. And this little bend in the elbow actually is pretty important. You don't want to get that too high or too low. Try to get that right where you see it, just a little below the horizontal line. Well, it's time to do basically the same thing for the male character, so let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so you can see I've sort of flipped things around here. She's turning her head to face him. He's going to be turning his head to face her. And notice that the line of the central line here, the head lines up with that. I've made him just a tiny bit taller than she is. Not necessary, of course. And basically, we're ready now to move on to drawing his body. All right, well, I thought I'd stop here before I get too far into drawing this arm. Very similar, really, except that, you know, I've narrowed her waist here to give her a more feminine look. I've made his shoulders more broad. Again, all of this is up to personal preference. You certainly don't have to, you know, make the characters look so different. In fact, I very often see with chibi characters, the bodies look almost identical. In any case, my plan is to have him with his arm bent, holding a little basket of apples, like they've gone apple picking. This is going to be the autumnest autumn picture that ever autumned, filled with all the crackling leaves underfoot and so forth. So let me go ahead and draw the rest of his arms, and then we'll nearly be done. All right, so his arm also bending at nearly the same place there so that they can be holding hands. And notice that this hand, as he is carrying, you know, will be carrying this basket over his elbow, is tilted up so that it touches that central horizontal line. Well, the last of these basic guidelines is to get just a few sort of crosshair type lines for placing the eyes and the mouths. All right, so that's it for the basic guidelines. We're going to tell old man Time-Lapse to go out and get some cider and donuts, because we're going to do real-time drawing now. And I think what I ought to do is try to refocus, see if I can zoom in a little closer on the faces. Now, some of you may have noticed that this paper is not actually white. I'll bring out a piece of white paper to show you the contrast. It is a sort of pale brown, and that's going to help later on when I pull out my beloved white gouache. But for now, let's go ahead and get into drawing. I'm going to start with the facial features, actually, and forgive me, I'm pulling out this microscopically small pencil here that still has an eraser. What a pro I am. I have to use two different erasers, or two different pencils. One has an eraser, but is too small. The other is the proper length, but has no eraser. Time to go shopping for new Dixon Ticonderogas. Anyway, having lightened those up a little, we can get into placing these facial features. Now, you may have noticed that I had just one line here for her facial features, two for his. That's because I'm going to be drawing her eyes kind of squinted shut. And what I'm going to do is begin with that sort of crosshair line that we'd put in place there, the sort of three-quarter point of view, and drop in a very gently curved line here for giving her those classic happy and chibi eyes. And leaving a gap, that's the important thing, leaving a gap, I'm going to draw the second eye over here. And maybe make each eye just a tiny bit thicker on the outside edge than on the inside edge. That's just personal preference. But notice that they're not these super curved, cartoony, happy eyes. I'm not a huge fan of those. I'll do them every once in a while for a sort of super cartoony effect. But generally, I like them just very gently curved. And then here I've drawn in one extra line for the folds of the eyelids. The eyebrows, I want to get a fair distance. I want her to look very carefree, and the closer the eyebrows are to the eyes, the more the look tends to be intense or concerned or whatever. And by getting that little gap in there, that helps convey the emotions. I can skip drawing the nose. Some people will draw a tiny little dot of a nose for a chibi character. I'm just going to skip the nose altogether and move down here to drawing the happy little mouth. Again, I don't like to draw a huge smiley smile. Smiley smile. I prefer to keep it a little, believable in proportion, I suppose, to the rest of her face. I guess I can go ahead and erase the rest of that line, but you do notice that there is the connection there in terms of the eye down to the mouth, that they are on a similar sort of vertical line there. So let's keep moving. I want to go ahead and draw the hairstyle. I always encourage people to, be creative. Draw any hairstyle that you prefer. Actually, some people may want to take this how to draw video and sort of drop in actual people that they know. That might be kind of fun. Put yourself and your sweetie together strolling through the leaves. In any case, I've decided to give this female character her hairstyle is going to be a little bit like Anna from Frozen in terms of having the braid in the back. But you can see me making all of the lines kind of follow along with the natural contour of her head. Always a good idea to think where the part is, or what is the point that all the hair is flowing down from. And as I said, in the spirit of doing a little Anna type of a character, I am going to have a braided, what is that, ponytail? I am going to do my old system for drawing braids, and I'm going to create 3 sort of vaguely heart-shaped subdivisions of subsections here. Although I have found that it's helpful to make them almost a little more check-marked, make one longer than the other. If you make one side a little longer than the other, that allows you to drop in this extra line, and boom, it sort of starts to look like braided hair. I have a whole separate video on that. If you struggle with drawing braids, I will put a link. It'll be like the second link in the info box, the link to my braid video. And maybe later on I'll draw a ribbon there, but let's keep moving on to drawing, let's move on to his face. I guess we might as well do that. Let's make his eyes open, although I could certainly have done both having the same style, but I thought it might be more interesting to have one character with the eyes squinted shut and the others happy, but with the eyes still open. But so you see me again using this curving vertical line here to help place the one eye. Then you think of, maybe get at least one eye's worth of distance. Having the eyes too close together is definitely a problem. I've had to sort of train myself to sort of move the eyes a good distance from one another so as to get the proportions right. I'm giving his eyes a little bit of a thicker upper eyelash, and then maybe just a tiny little hook here at the end. Now, I'm already at this early stage going to start deciding the light source. Let's have a highlight here in the upper right side of each one of his eyes, and that means that the light is shining from the upper right, and all the shadows will come down on the lower left. And just as I did here, you know, her hair is all sort of flowing from this one point. I'm going to sort of pick a similar point for him over here. And all of the hair, like watch this, I'm going to go ahead and draw one of the swoops, the patented curly swoops of hair coming down, but it all sort of relates back to that initial point up there. I realize now that I've sort of done things out of order. I didn't draw his mouth yet. Sorry, folks. I'm just kind of winging it here today. In any case, let's go ahead and do that mouth. And she's got her mouth open. I think I'll have him just sort of smiling in a less toothy way. But again, using that vertical line to place the mouth. And that means I can get back to drawing the hair. I thought it might be fun if he has one of these sort of stray strands of hair. In fact, I'd like his hair to be a little more, you know, wild or untamed compared to hers. So let's go ahead and get a bunch of strands over here as we come around the edge. Oh, I forgot to put his ear. Let me go ahead and I'll put a strand that comes down here by his eye and then drop in an ear. I thought I saw a comment on one of my videos saying, you're making the ears too low. And, yeah, you know, it's personal preference. Maybe I am making them too low. My apologies. If you feel they are too low on the head, go ahead and move them up higher. And go ahead and change anything in this video. That's, you know, I've said it before, but I need to say it again. Everything in here is just my personal preference. No need to follow everything that I'm doing. So again, I wanted to have him have a slightly wilder looking hairstyle, so getting some stray strands of hair. And that kind of finishes that, except I didn't do the fold of the upper eyelid. I'm just forgetting. I'm doing everything way out of order today. I don't know what's got into me, folks. And we get the eyebrows. Again, getting a certain distance there between the upper eyelash line and the eyebrows. And I'll probably refine this more later on. But let's go ahead and move on to, I guess we're still in frame enough that I can do the do some of the clothing details here before we have to shift focus. But I thought it might be nice if she's wearing a scarf. My apologies, it sounds like a neighbor is mowing his or her lawn. Don't know if that is showing up in the audio, folks, but it's too late, people. Reality has intruded on my video, but probably nobody can hear any of that, and that's just me ruining my own video by referring to something people can't hear. In any case, drawing the scarf, getting a few curving lines that sort of intersect here. It's almost like a Y shape here that to me conveys the folding cloth. I'm making her scarf quite short so as to basically, as a design principle, I don't want it getting in the way of them holding hands. And then I'm going to come down here and have her wearing a sort of cardigan sweater. I always like when it's a little, like the bottom button is not buttoned so as to reveal the two different sides. And one thing that I always sort of forget and have to remind myself of is that, you know, a woman's sweater has buttons on a particular side of the sweater. And I often find myself thinking, which side should I put the buttons, over here or over here? Well, I'm always remembering as just rule of thumb for myself is to put them on the left side of that line. And I do hope I've got that right, and if I've memorized the wrong way, please forgive me. But yeah, that's just some sort of little detail thing that People are sticklers for details. When I do a sweater, I always like to put little lines here at the bottom, give a border that has little lines. To me, that gives it a very sweatery feeling. Get some wrinkles in at the elbow where they tend to occur. And then, yeah, we're still in frame. I can draw the hands here. You have to decide whose hand is sort of cupping the other hand. I'm going to have his fingers coming up from beneath, and her fingers clamping down. Clamping, it sounds like she's gripping her iron grip on his hand. Oh, honey, please. You're crushing me. In any case, that you have to make some decision as to which hand is the higher of the two. And then, again, getting wrinkles over here. I'll just go ahead and I'm going to give him a sort of a turtleneck sweater kind of a thing. Like I said, trying to make this very autumny. So the clothing is playing a part in that. And my idea for his sweater is to, I don't know the term, I never know the term for anything actually, so that's no surprise, but there's a certain type of sweater that has these sort of decorative columns. Here, I'll go ahead and just real quickly dash this in. But some of you hopefully know, and you can tell me in the comment section if there's a name for this type of sweater. But it has, I'm only going to put in like 2 or 3 of them, but they have these, I'm not explaining this very well, but I'm going to go ahead and put in these like letter V's to let you know what I'm talking about. Have these little columns of, you know, purely decorative knitting, I guess it is. And he's going to be wearing one of these sweaters, and eventually with the white gouache we're going to make it white, and then it really does look like one of these classic white sweaters, at least I hope it will. I don't believe that those columns need to extend onto the arms. At least they won't in my world. I'm going to get a couple of wrinkles in here, though, at the waist. And I guess it's time now to begin. I'm going to get an indication of the handle of this basket. I don't think I'm going to draw the whole basket, though, because that would start to go out of frame, probably. So I'll just get the handle of it in place. And this may be one of the last things that I do as I draw his hand here. Generally don't see the fingers so much with chibi characters, so I just sort of, you know, it's just very close to looking like a snowball or something. And that probably takes care of everything that we need in this part of the drawing, so I'm going to go ahead and change focus so that we can move down to drawing the legs. And wouldn't you know it, now that I've got that done, I realize that I think that this will look better if we see a little indication of this other strand of hair on the other side of her cheek. But it is now time to move on to drawing their jeans. I figure they're both going to be wearing blue jeans on this chilly autumn day, but I thought she could be wearing boots. And what I always like to do when someone is wearing boots is to get some extra wrinkles in there of the cloth sort of bunching up near the boots. And chibi characters generally have quite small feet, so I'm just going to leave it. And also they're going to be sort of walking through the leaves, and there's going to be leaves all over the place, you know, sort of in the foreground. So I'm not going to get too concerned with drawing the details of the boots, but I think we'll get like a seam here. I've talked about this before, how I like to get a little bit of a seam on the side of the jeans, just as a little bit of detail there. Maybe get some wrinkles here at the waist that I forgot earlier in the video. Let's go ahead and put a thumb, and I'm actually going to have this hand open instead of, because a lot of these hands here are sort of like balled up into fists or whatever, and I thought it might be nice to have a change of pace and have this hand open. So you can see the fingers, again, grabbing my eraser pencil. My alternate. I promise by next week I'll have new pencils. How sad that a man in my position can't have new. I can surely afford new Dixon Takent Taroga pencils by In any case, let's move on and draw his genes. Now, as I said, I've sort of exaggerated the feminine characteristics here in terms of the shape of her body, and I'm going to kind of carry on with that and give him more sort of like straight lines. Again, optional. You don't have to do such big variation from male to female if you don't want to. But I'm going to get some wrinkles here at the bottom because he's not going to be wearing boots. At least if he is, they aren't coming up over the cloth. So we're going to see extra wrinkles down here, as they tend to occur in blue jeans. And again, nice thing about this way of drawing someone walking is that the other leg gets largely obscured and you barely have to draw it at all. It's always pretty sweet when you don't have to draw something. I'm going to go ahead now, and this will be the last of this part of the sort of real-time line-by-line drawing segment. I probably am going to have to kick it into time-lapse for a lot of the other stuff in this video. But I'm going to go ahead and draw this basket of apples. They've been out to the orchards. Those of you who are in Australia and New Zealand, you're like, it is not autumn right now, man. You are so, what do you call that? Eurocentric? Northern-centric? There's got to be a word for it. People who are, forget that the seasons are different on the other side of the equator. My apologies. Maybe you can hold off and watch this video in the spring, in our spring, your autumn. But I don't want you to hold off. Please watch the video now. Drawing a bunch of apples in here. I'm going to put, again, sort of lines here that make it look like a woven basket, one of those classic old-fashioned woven baskets. I think I'll get a couple of leaves and stems here for making it clear that these are apples. And I'm not going to draw every single, like I was saying, this is like a woven basket. I'm not going to attempt to draw every single line there. But I'll get a few mostly horizontal lines, and then maybe just drop in the occasional dash of a vertical line to give the sense of it being a woven basket kind of a thing. And that probably takes us through to all the different, key lines. Key lime. It sounded like I said key lime. I must be hungry or something. The most important lines, let us say, of this drawing. And now what I think I'm going to do is pull out my watercolors, refocus the camera, pull out my watercolors, and I'm going to use watercolor for really doing almost all of the color in this video, which is somewhat unusual compared to other illustrations that I've done. But I thought it's been a while since I've done a watercolor video, and I'll do some of it real time and hopefully be able to give you a few pointers about that coloring technique. So let's go ahead and I'll grab my watercolors and be right back. All right, so I erased all of those initial basic guidelines of the square. Very important, actually, when you're doing watercolor to erase any unwanted pencil lines before putting down watercolor, because it does tend to set it into the page, and then you can't erase after you've got watercolor on top of it. I'm putting in very loose suggestions of leaves here. And the fun part about this is you kind of can't make a mistake. I mean, it's all so impressionistic, and I'll be dropping all of this in basically by way of dabs of the brush. So there's almost no point in me getting too concerned with individual leaves. But I always like when you can kind of get away with very loose pencil work like this. In fact, I'm going to try, as I continue with this, with the watercoloring and with the final line work, to just keep it loose, to really have a nice light touch at the end if I can. And maybe get some little hint of like a path here. My idea is that something, one of these autumn days where there's so many leaves on the ground that you basically can't see the path anymore, but I thought I'd get some little indication of the sides of the sidewalk or whatever it is, dirt path, in perspective. And I did like this idea of some of the leaves getting kind of kicked up into the air to accentuate this idea of you know, them walking through the leaves and causing some of them to get kicked out of the way. And maybe that takes care of that. I'm going to go ahead now and pull out my watercolor brush. I've got a little cup of water here, basically. Maybe move it so it's not directly on the other side, although it is creating shadows here. Let's move it over here, Mark. Can you do this properly? Have you ever done this before? I'm going to begin doing sort of a ochre color for her hair. There's no way I can do all of this real time, but I'll do a little bit of it real time and give you hopefully some advice about using watercolor. Now, I should say that you don't have to do this with watercolor. You could do this with markers. You could do it with colored pencils, any coloring tool that you prefer. But if you are interested in trying watercolors, here's a bit of my advice to the technique. You kind of have to put down maybe one layer at a time. I feel like you have maybe 3 layers before you start muddying things up. So I'm really trying to cover all of this with just a single unchanging shade of ochre. Not concerning myself with adding any secondary color at this stage. Oh, you know, I forgot about the ribbon, right? I said I was going to do a ribbon. Now, one thing that I do when I'm doing watercolors is I try to think in advance about any other things in the drawing that are going to have this same color. So I think, hey, the basket, that's also going to be ochre. Instead of washing this color out and then having to use it, you know, come back to it later, let's get all of these ochres done at the same time. That's more, you know, just sort of a time-saving thing. But also, if you plan out your drawings so that there are repeating colors, then you visually it becomes a more united illustration anyway. You know, it sort of pulls it, ties it together. What was that line from that Coen Brothers movie? That carpet, it really tied the room together. This has got to be the first time I made a reference to The Big Lebowski in one of my videos. Probably the last time. Anyway, you see me dropping in really quickly, and for me this is kind of fun to know that I almost can't make any mistakes at this stage. It's all very impressionistic. One thing that I'm doing, though, with the leaves is I'm making tinier dabs as we get nearer to the horizon to suggest a little, you know, the leaves appearing smaller back there. And then as I get lower down on the page, closer to the viewer, then I'm making bigger dabs. So that's the only sort of principle that's keeping me a little bit careful. But otherwise, it's all very, you know, just dashing it in there. And now it is time for me to move on to, well, I'll do one more thing real time. Let's do I'll do some red for her scarf, which will also be the red of the apples. So let's see. I'm trying to get like an autumnal burnt red in here. Don't know if I'm pulling that off, but I really, like I said, I want this to be a super autumny looking illustration, and so all the colors, you know, the color is a big part in that. You know, choose these autumn type colors. If you're using, you know, very cold blues and you know, you don't have any of these classically autumn looking colors, it's going to be hard for people to have the autumny feeling that you want. Autumny, is that a word? Lobotomy. I really need more coffee, or had too much. I can never decide which one it is. Anyway, you see me repeating the red there. You know what? I'm going to really go out on a limb here. I'm actually going to do the color of the ribbon without having actually drawn the ribbon. Crilly. This is like the tightrope without a net. And then I'm going to come in later to actually illustrate the ribbon. I don't normally do this, but I forgot I wanted her to have the matching ribbon and Scarf. And since I've already got my brush loaded up with red, now is the time to just go ahead and do it. Go ahead and get that ribbon color in there, and then I'll define it later on with pencil. But one last thing I'm going to do real time, and then I'm going to call back my good old friend, Old Man Time-Lapse, to help us speed through the remainder of this video. But for now, I want to go back into her hair with a slightly darker shade of brown. Sorry that's taking me a moment here, and I'm sort of testing it out on the page to make sure I get the right shade. And I would advise you to do that anytime you're working in watercolor. Go ahead and test it out before you put it on the page. But here I am going in. Like I said, I'll give myself 2, maybe 3 layers at most. And again, this comes back into what I was talking about with the deciding the light source. I decided that the light source is on the right, so all of these indications of darker brown are coming in here over on the left. So it is sort of key that you establish your light source if you want to do this kind of stuff. Establish your light source at the beginning, and don't forget about it halfway through. I'm going to use also this, and maybe, one thing that I don't really talk about this too much, but notice how far I go in a single dipping of the brush. I haven't reloaded this brush with brown. I basically did all of this with a single dip of the brush. And I don't know if that's sort of laziness, or I just, I'm getting the most out of one dip of the brush and not constantly going back and reloading it. And sadly, I think it is time to say, hey, Old Man Time-Lapse, get back here, stop eating that donut, take one last swig of apple cider, and help me zoom through the rest of this video. I'm going to go ahead and do all the coloring, and then come back. On top of that, you're going to see me use my trusty brown Prismacolor. That's right, I said brown Prismacolor. This time I'm actually going to use a dark brown instead of black. Again, all in the service of creating this very autumny looking illustration. And then I'll come back and do a little bit of real time of my beloved white gouache. But you're going to see me go through here and do all of the coloring, all the watercoloring, and all of the final line work right now with the help of my good old pal, Old Man Time-Lapse. Alright, well, I've got all the colors down, I've got all the line work done. It's time to pull out my beloved white gouache, the opaque white paint that I loved using. Because we've used this sort of very pale brown paper to begin with, this is really going to help the white gouache to have an added effect. It really stands out against that paper, as you can see. And I'm going to go in here and do a little bit of a highlight for her hair. Again, I'm trying to remember the light source, and so I'm making the highlight a little shinier over here, having it kind of trail off as it heads in that direction. I have to be sort of judicious in terms of what, what area gets the white paint. You don't want to start putting shiny marks where they don't belong, you know what I mean? Like, I might try to put a little hint of this on their skin as if they're being lit from the side, but you have to be careful because it might make them look plasticky or metallic or something. I may even resort to using white colored pencil. How about if we do it that way? And that'll be an added technique, showing that white colored pencil tends to have a more subtle effect, whereas white gouache, it's very sharp. You can see me turning these into shiny apples the moment that white gouache hits. It really gives it that reflective quality. I think one other area where it might make sense to have some white gouache would be in the area of her boot. There's a snake in my boot. Can you tell I'm a dad? Making reference to... You don't have to be a dad to like Toy Story. What are you talking about, really? Anyway, that might do it in terms of shiny stuff. Let me go ahead and do that. I'm going to grab my, well, actually, hang on, the wicker basket. Sometimes wicker baskets are kind of lacquered a little. So that could work as something that has a bit of a shine to it. Maybe put some indications of that here along the side. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and switch now to a white colored pencil to show you how we might use a technique that makes a white area that's not quite so bold, not quite so shiny looking. All right, let's see how this goes then. I thought I wanted his shirt to be, or his sweater to be white, and I thought using the white colored pencil. Now again, this is only made possible by way of the sort of light brown, pale brown paper that I was using at the start. Putting white pencil on white paper, you don't get this effect at all. It's just invisible, really. But thanks to the paper, and you can find paper like this at, I would say, any arts and crafts store. Certainly a specialty art supply store is going to have loads of different kinds of paper, among them toned paper like this. But you see me going in and little by little lightening up the various areas of his sweater. How's this for autumny, people? It is the autumnest autumn picture I ever seen. Crilly, knock it off with all the autumn already. But I was thinking, if this proves popular as a video of people like this, maybe I could continue and do a series of seasonal chibi illustrations. Let me know what you think. It might be kind of fun, and then we could look back and compare them all. Maybe this same couple enjoying the seasons, or maybe they would be different chibi characters doing different seasonal stuff. But this is pretty much going to end it for this video. I think you might see me go through and, maybe like over here on her jeans. I think, again, this is one of the benefits of using pencil. If I tried to do this with brush, the effect would be way too pronounced. So I'll go ahead and, in time-lapse, use the colored pencil, maybe a little bit of the gouache to finish off this aspect of it, and we'll be back with a few final words. Alright, well, there's my video on how to draw a chibi-style autumn scene. You can see I added the blushies there at the last minute. Can't sleep at night if I end one of these videos without adding the blushies. Wake up in a cold sweat. I forgot the blushies. But let's go ahead and thank anyone who has